green anyway on your iPhone when you drop it.
This is a new patent from Apple that they're looking at a whole range of new technologies to try and prevent this happening. Some of them are a little far-fetched. One involves using the phone's GPS for the phone to right itself when you drop it.
Oh, come on.
But my favourite one is definitely the idea of a thrust mechanism that could deploy compressed gas using some sort of gas canister to turn your phone around when you drop it. A sort of a jet-propelled iPhone. If you like. Now, it's worth pointing out that technology companies like Apple patent a whole load of technologies they never actually make, but they just want to be in there first to make sure that they have the rights to develop it exclusively.
You can just see the advert, can't you? A thrust phone that deploys gas.
Yeah.
It's possible, I suppose. You see, the end of his bulletins get more and more bizarre, don't they? Thanks, Steve.
It's all for you, Stuart.
Yeah, I know. It's to keep me awake at this time of day. Going to have a look at what's happening in the international papers now. Flo's here. She doesn't need keeping awake. It's a very serious story in all the papers today. It's, of course, the Hong Kong one that you're starting with, isn't it? The Occupy Central movement surrendering to police as pro-democracy protests appearing to wither there a little bit?
Absolutely. Those three leaders were quickly released without charge, but it's front page news in mainland China. It's on the front page of China Daily today. It says that the three founders of the Occupy Central movement have stepped away from the illegal protests and led dozens of others to surrender. So this is very much in line with what China Daily has been saying. It's always said that these protests were illegal. South China Morning Post, a Hong Kong-based paper, also applauds this high-profile surrender. It says, at long last, in its editorial today. You can see here that this editorial is saying that the Occupy Central movement is spinning out of control. However lofty the goal, Occupy has not brought us closer to democracy. Instead of being civilized and peaceful, the protests have become increasingly violent. And South China Morning Post really blames student groups for this turning point, this shift, for deviating the campaign from its original spirit of peace and love. As you can see here, the editorial says it's time to surrender and retreat. There's a very interesting article today in the Wall Street Journal about what's happening in Hong Kong today. It says that what we're seeing is a generational split emerging in the movement. You have the traditional pro-democracy activists who are middle-aged. They're the ones who are surrendering to the police. And then you have this new generation of student protesters who have vowed to soldier on, and this raises the prospect of further clashes with police.
Now, lots of papers also focusing on the reports of Iranian fighter jets striking Islamic State group targets in Iraq recently.
That's right. Iranian and Pentagon officials have acknowledged that these strikes took place in Iraq last week. The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, you can see him on the front page of the Wall Street Journal here, he would not confirm these reports, but he did say that any Iranian action against Islamic State group in Iraq would be positive. Now, The Independent points out that Tehran may have formed an unlikely alliance with its arch enemy. And you can see here it says that Iran is joining Great Satan's war on ISIS, so the Islamic State group. The New York Times is also focusing on this and says that this new military approach of Iran's really highlights the fact that Tehran and Washington are finding themselves fighting against the same enemy increasingly in a public way. And you can see, I like this title here. I think it sums things up quite well. The U.S. and Iran both attack ISIS, but they try not to look like allies. It says, this article points out that there's no direct coordination in Iraq between Iran and the United States, but there is a de facto non-aggression pact on either side that neither side wants to acknowledge.
Going to move stateside now, continuing stateside in a way. Protests being held after a grand jury in New York decided not to indict a white police officer who killed an unarmed black man. That's
right. This sounds very familiar, but this is happening not in Ferguson, Missouri, but in New York City. Lots of emotion and anger on the streets. So yesterday, this was a Staten Island grand jury. It decided there wasn't enough evidence to charge a 29-year-old white police officer, Daniel Pantaleo. Now, in July, he was caught on tape arresting a 43-year-old black man named Eric Garner for allegedly selling loose cigarettes, so illegal cigarettes. Now, this was caught on tape, as I said. This video went viral. We were actually talking about it back when it happened. Sure. It's very hard to watch. You can see this white police officer grab Garner in what appears to be a chokehold. Now, Garner, who was this asthmatic, can be heard shouting, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," his final words, and that has become really a rallying cry for those who are protesting against his death.
And lots of focus as well on the fact that the NYPD actually banned the use of chokeholds back in 1993.
Absolutely. The Washington Post is reporting on this today. It points out that the NYPD banned chokeholds about 20 years ago, but there have been hundreds of complaints that are still being filed. It points out that, for instance, between June 2013 and July 2014, an independent city agency that examines accusations of police misconduct received more than 200 chokehold complaints. The New York Times in its editorial is also focusing on this. It says what's clear is that this is vicious policing and an innocent man is dead. The officer used a forbidden tactic to brutalize a citizen who was not acting belligerently, posed no risk of flight, brandished no weapon, and was heavily outnumbered. And as I said, this decision in New York City comes just barely a week, well, more than a week after that decision in Ferguson, Missouri. The Daily Beast says this is a grim echo. It's almost like history repeating itself. And you can see here, the Daily Beast wonders, is New York City the next Ferguson? This is a question that lots of papers are asking today. It's interesting to note that civil rights leaders have called for a massive protest against such police brutality, and they're calling on it to be held on December 13th.
Okay, well, if it happens, of course, we'll cover it here on France 24. Thanks a lot, Flo and Stephen. Back, of course, regularly here on France 24.